Yeah, a little bit more about me. I joined Hands-On Greater Phoenix here in April of 2018. So I've been here for a little bit more than 4 years now. In that entire time, I've been running our AmeriCorps VISTA program, which has existed with Hands-On for over 15 years. And then before that, Hands-On was already working in AmeriCorps state programs. Personally, I served in Peace Corps. I was in Mongolia from 2010 to 12. And we'll talk a little bit that Peace Corps is not a part of AmeriCorps. A lot of people make that mistake, but it's actually completely different parts of the government. After my Peace Corps service, looking at all the issues that I cared about, national service after my experience in Peace Corps was something that just really spoke to me around the transformative model that's kind of there, because it's not just about the work that you're doing, but it's the change that you're making in those people who are doing that work and how they carry that through the rest of their lives. And so I ended up at Teach for America on staff there. A lot of people make that mistake. They'll be, oh, what did you teach? I didn't teach anything. I was on staff. The core members in Teach for America are the teachers. But part of what I did there was running our AmeriCorps compliance, our exit enrollment paperwork and things like that. And then that's where I really cut my teeth on the system known as e-grants, which is the background system that you use to manage AmeriCorps projects. It's not a great system, as you might imagine, since it's a federal computer system that was designed in the early 2000s and has never been updated. So if you know that, you're a long ways ahead of the pack. So then when I had the chance to come over here, it really made sense to come over. One of the things throughout this presentation, first of all, just know that this is coming from my experience having worked in various AmeriCorps programs and caring about national service, but for sure, if you know something, especially about some of the more outlying programs that I don't, I'd be happy for you to share that. I'm going to stop throughout this presentation, especially kind of at the end of each section of the different types of AmeriCorps. If there's a question that feels more relevant to this moment, please feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and kind of jump in. Anne's going to be trying to keep an eye on the chat for me to be looking for some questions there. If you just want to throw your question in there for the end as well, I'll have time at the end to answer questions. So go ahead and jump in here. My objectives for today is to help you understand the basics of becoming one of our partners. I'll talk a little bit about my program in particular and what it takes to be one of our partners and host one of our AmeriCorps members. I want you to understand why AmeriCorps is so complicated, and hopefully in understanding why it's complicated, you also understand more about it and you can talk more about it to your coworkers, and you can make use of it yourself. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to name the major branches of AmeriCorps and kind of just the major differences between them. I think it's really important. I personally come from a spot where I obviously believe very much in national service, and both my father and my uncle that I'm named after served in Vietnam, and both my grandfathers were in World War II, and I served in Peace Corps, and I really feel that our country should be at a spot where service is expected, whether that's Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, or the military. And so just having people know what AmeriCorps is and what it's doing out there, I think is really important. So first of all, if this is the only thing you can take away from today, it's AmeriCorps, not AmeriCorps. It's like the Peace Corps or the Marine Corps. We just kind of ignore that S. I can't tell you how much it hurts me when people who have served in AmeriCorps I meet and they still say AmeriCorps. So AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, Marine Corps, and if you're writing it out, you can just note that AmeriCorps actually doesn't have a space, capital A, capital C, and it's all together. Peace Corps, Marine Corps does have a space in between those. So, and seriously, if you get only this, I'd be so happy. So I already heard a couple people speaking up as everybody was coming in. I'd love to hear just one or two people talk about their experiences with AmeriCorps, whether you served or you helped run a program, or if you just want to share what you know about AmeriCorps, kind of what you heard. You can get a raised hand, or you could just unmute. Some of you already said things, so I know that there's answers out there.
I'll start
All
us
right.
off.
Thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Evelyn. I work with the City of Tempe in the Sustainability and Resilience Office, but before this, I did actually do 2 terms of service in an AmeriCorps program called Public Allies, which is scattered about 15 or 16 cities through the country, and they're 10-month terms of service placed at a nonprofit. It's really wraps itself up as a nonprofit leadership experience with AmeriCorps. So
Awesome.
one of the best things I've ever done. So great.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
You get one other person to share, whether you served yourself or you know somebody who served, you've interacted with another program.
Oh, it looks like Martha has her hand up.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, everybody. Marty Johnson. So I actually worked, it was called CRAC at the time. Now it's called American Conservation Program. And I did 2 terms of service doing conservation work around the Southwest.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Was that, do you know, was that based out of Arizona or?
Yeah, it was based in Flagstaff.
Okay. Yep. I think I just talked to somebody else who'd served in that program when it had the name that it had with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for sharing. So we're going to be talking about the complexities of AmeriCorps today, and I just want everybody to keep in mind that your previous experience might not line up with some of what my program is, or even programs that are very similar to yours. And we're going to talk about why that is and why there's this kind of complication. And I'll also add, you know, I've been directly working in AmeriCorps programs for 7 years, and I still learn things. So first of all, we'll kind of start at the very top, the Corporation for National and Community Service. So this is the overarching organization, and I got a little picture here in the next slide that kind of houses AmeriCorps and some of these other programs. They have opportunities for Americans of all ages. There's Senior Corps, AmeriCorps Volunteer Generation Fund, and a lot more. Currently, there's a little over 270,000 AmeriCorps members that serve annually across the U.S. There's been some fluctuation through the pandemic with this, but also the Biden administration came in and made a push in part of the Build Back Better Act. I believe it was in that. That was passed, had money to expand AmeriCorps. And so they're looking to almost kind of double the size of AmeriCorps longer term. AmeriCorps is right now kind of figuring out what foundational things they need to kind of get in place before they do that big expansion. Here in Arizona, we have a little over 2,400 members that usually serve annually, at around 500 sites all across the state. So for more information on this, if you want to go find out more about different AmeriCorps programs, or you're talking to somebody who's maybe interested in serving, you can send them to AmeriCorps.gov. Now here right away is one of our bits of confusing information. So the Corporation for National and Community Service, CNCS, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, decided that they needed to try to make things less complicated. And so they're now just AmeriCorps themselves. They call themselves AmeriCorps. But since CNCS was created by an act of Congress, they can't just change their name. So their branding is all AmeriCorps, but CNCS itself still exists. So you'll hear me use those terms interchangeably, CNCS or AmeriCorps. And I'm just talking about the high level federal government when I'm talking about that. So as you can see here, this is just a little bit of a little visualization of how kind of all this interacts, especially with my program. So we have CNCS/AmeriCorps at the top, and then there's Senior Corps, the Volunteer Generation Fund, then there's kind of AmeriCorps proper. And then out of AmeriCorps proper, there's what we call NCCC, there's state and national programs, there's VISTA program, which is what I am. And then we're going to be talking about most of these as we go through this presentation here. And then, so my program's a VISTA program. I'm an intermediary, and my members serve at another site. And so there's kind of all these different layers. We talk about this when we bring our members in. We got kind of these layers of bureaucracy, and there's different policies that some policies are enacted at the AmeriCorps level. Some of these policies are just VISTA policies. Some of them are my own policies running my own program. And then some of them has to do with the site that my members are at. So this is one of the main areas where that kind of complication kind of comes in. As I noted before, notice that Peace Corps is not in here. So AmeriCorps falls under the executive branch, and Peace Corps is actually a part of the State Department. So there is some history between the two, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but Peace Corps is actually completely its own thing. So first of all, understanding the difference in between intermediary or direct grants. This is kind of a big one. So for the most part, we're going to be talking about programs kind of at the AmeriCorps program level, not at the intermediary level. So difference between intermediary or direct is that, as you can see on this, AmeriCorps or the state government approves a program. As you see on the left, Hands-On or Teach for America, we might hold that grant. We do all the paperwork required, all the reporting, all the recruiting of the members. But then our members actually serve at another organization. So mine serve with various partners that I work with. Teach for America, they're all working with schools. An intermediary might be very focused, like Teach for America. All their members are teachers. They all work in Title I schools. Or they might be, and this is my own term that I've come up with after learning more about different organizations and having conversations with other intermediaries. I'm what I call an unfocused intermediary, meaning that like my job really is to make having an AmeriCorps member easier for my partners, but I'll work in whatever area that we can put a position that fits under the AmeriCorps, under the VISTA programming. So really, and then you have what might be direct grant, like Habitat for Humanity, where they have those members, they're doing all that grant writing themselves, and then their members are just staying with them and working with them. So as we talk about these different resources, you can think about whether you would want to potentially take something on as a direct grant, or maybe you want to try to find another organization who is an intermediary who can work with you in what you want to do. Really, the biggest thing as you're thinking about even considering AmeriCorps is what it takes to run a successful project. And I personally would say that is finding somebody who really understands the national service mindset and who's going to design and run a program that's going to be able to accomplish your goals, but also be satisfying and rewarding to the members that you're bringing in. It takes a lot of effort to run these programs. I run a 20-member program, and it's almost my full-time job. So a lot of times people might take on a project and they think, oh, well, I can do this as like a third of my role. And it ends up being a lot more than that. Part of that has to do the way we run our project. Since I recruit people throughout the year, I could probably run it with less time if I only recruited people once or twice a year. But asking yourself whether you have that capacity and whether you kind of have that knowledge to make it satisfying for the members who are going to come in. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what members are looking for here a little bit later. As we also talk about different things, keep in mind that the amount of time, the training that goes into the members, the support for those members, the benefits for those members, reporting requirements, cost share, which might be the cost that an organization's paying to have a member, and between different intermediary partners can look very, very different. So for me, there is a little bit of a financial cost share. For other organizations, maybe they have enough donors that they offer their members out there to organizations for free. There's really no AmeriCorps standards, or there are a few standards around what an intermediary kind of puts in versus how much the site that they're partnering with puts in for all those different aspects of things. And as I said today, we're focused a little bit more on the AmeriCorps program level, not the individual intermediaries and the differences between those intermediaries. So actually, before we move here, just to I'm going to start talking about the individual projects or the individual programs, and we'll start with state and national. Any immediate questions on the big monster that is AmeriCorps. All right, cool. Well, I'm sure you'll have questions soon enough. So now we're going to talk about like the individual branches of AmeriCorps. And again, branches is a little bit my own terminology. National service still kind of has some challenges around having a single terminology that kind of spreads across all of it. So AmeriCorps state and national. First of all, what's the difference between state and national, and like why are they grouped together? They're grouped together because they're basically the same. The real difference between state and national is coming back here to where I have AmeriCorps, or the state government, which is the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family here in Arizona, is when you apply to have your program, if you operate in multiple states, you would apply to AmeriCorps directly in DC, and you would be considered a national program. And if you're only operating in the state of Arizona, you would apply to the state board of whichever state you're in. And in Arizona, it's the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family. A little bit of the history there is when AmeriCorps was created, the states didn't want the federal government just coming in and doing whatever the federal government wanted. They wanted some say as to where that money and those resources were going. And so the answer to that was each state set up some sort of board, and the state kind of decided what that was. In some states, those boards are run by a nonprofit, they are headed by a nonprofit. In other states, it lives in the governor's office, as it does with us. In some states, it's in the legislative office. But here, it's the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family. So if you're familiar with Emily Litchfield, she heads that up over there. So AmeriCorps State and National is probably our least focused of the AmeriCorps branches. The program's requirements can vary greatly. The members can engage in direct or indirect service, and I'll talk about what that is here in a moment. The members might be full-time or part-time. The members might serve part year or multiple years. Teach for America is a multiple year commitment. The benefits can vary from being very much like VISTA benefits to being more like a job. So Teach for America, as an example again, is what's kind of termed professional AmeriCorps. And that's a way to use AmeriCorps to help recruit people for positions that are hard to recruit or maintain in areas that work in missions that AmeriCorps is focused on. So teachers in Title I schools. There's also rural doctor programs. And going back to those benefits, Teach for America teachers are paid full salaries like any other teacher in the school that they're working in. They do have some additional AmeriCorps benefits. So a state or national program has a wide variety and a lot of differences in it. Direct versus indirect service, I'm going to dive into a little bit, and we'll also talk about also capacity building and sustainable capacity building. But really, direct versus indirect means, are you giving a direct benefit to the population that you're intending to have an impact on? And the example I always give here is a tutoring program at a Title I school. So a state or national AmeriCorps member, they might tutor kids in a Title I school. They might sit down with the kids and give them math tutoring or reading lessons. And we'll talk about VISTA in a moment. A VISTA member would not do that. VISTA is very specifically indirect service. And so indirect might be creating that program, might be designing the training materials for that program. It could be recruiting the volunteers. So that's kind of our differences there. State and national, they could do both. So it's actually really possible to create a state program that looks very much like a VISTA program. It might do everything that a VISTA program does, but it ends up being a state program instead of a VISTA program. Why would you look at a state or national? As we're talking about each of these different branches, I kind of want to talk about like, why would you want one versus another? So state or national program is going to be good if you need direct service. You need those members actually engaging in that direct service. If you want to tack on AmeriCorps benefits to a hard to hire or hard to maintain role, again, like with Teach for America or some of the rural doctor programs, those are basically like jobs, but they just come with some of the benefits of AmeriCorps. So if, let's say, you have an entry-level position that kind of fits within the mission of AmeriCorps, you might be able to design an AmeriCorps program that would fit within this. If you want maximum flexibility and financial benefits that could be offered to members, you have a lot of flexibility in state and national programs to the benefits that can be a part of your program. And if you need a large number of maybe short-term or part-time, if you want to design a program that's only going to run for the summer, that's going to be geared towards college students, and they're going to be putting in 20 hours a week for 40 weeks. That's what you could do here. You can also do programs where maybe your members are only trying to get 500 hours, but they have the whole year to go get those hours. Those are other reasons that I look at a state or national program.
Blaine, we have a question in the chat from Elise Rogstad asking, can AmeriCorps projects be hosted by federal agencies, or are they limited to city, local governments and or NGOs?
Fantastic question. And I should have started with this too. So anybody can partner with basically anybody can partner with AmeriCorps except for-profit organizations. So it is possible. I know for a fact that it's possible as a federal agency to have AmeriCorps members. I don't know how challenging it might be to initially start a program if you're running that program yourself. But we'll actually be talking about FEMA Corps, which is a federal program. So I know that there are possibilities there. But for the rest of you, local governments, nonprofits can all partner with AmeriCorps or run an AmeriCorps program. Very good question. Any other questions on state or national at the moment? All right. I got you all over here on this screen, so you'll see me looking over here for your reactions. So AmeriCorps VISTA, what is AmeriCorps VISTA? I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth on this one since this is my own program. So there, we already kind of talked about how everybody can look a little bit different from program to program, and that's true with VISTA. But VISTA actually is a little bit more focused than state or national. All members in any VISTA program, if you talk to somebody and they're like, I'm a VISTA member, you'll know these things about them immediately. You know that they served full-time for 1 year. You know that they had some kind of focus on poverty alleviation or poverty-related issues. They had a focus on building sustainable capacity, or they were at least supposed to. Project roles are capped at 3 years. And all AmeriCorps VISTA members have just a poverty level living stipend. They have healthcare benefits and they get an education award at the end of their service. And we'll talk a little bit more about those benefits here in a couple of slides. But that poverty level living stipend kind of has some history to it. VISTA actually existed before AmeriCorps existed. It was created a couple years after Peace Corps, and it was originally, the original concept was to be kind of a domestic version of Peace Corps. And so like Peace Corps, you're supposed to be living amongst the community that you're trying to serve and living at the level of the community that you're trying to serve. And that makes way more sense in Peace Corps. In VISTA, it's a bit more challenging because, our members who are here in the city of Phoenix, they might not live in those communities that they're actually having an impact on. They might actually still even be at their parents' house in some cases. So it's good to know that history, though, because there are a number of things throughout VISTA that are different than AmeriCorps, and that just has to do with the history of it being originally like this domestic Peace Corps. Just looking at my notes here. One thing I will say, poverty is a broad topic, and we'll talk about that as well. Although VISTA has this poverty alleviation, that has expanded over time, what poverty is and the impacts of it and the work that VISTA members can get into. So VISTA members have a focus on building sustainable capacity. VISTA, as I said before, is specifically indirect service versus direct service. I usually tell people to expect VISTA members to be maybe 70 to 80% capacity of a full-time role. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. What VISTA members can't do, they should not be replacing current staff members. They shouldn't be used for like secretarial type tasks. Again, they don't do direct service. And one thing with AmeriCorps VISTA, and I'm pretty sure it applies to AmeriCorps State and National as well, is that you can't use VISTA members to write federal grants. And that's just, the federal government doesn't want federal money chasing federal money. So they shouldn't be writing those grants. They can work on the implementation of those grants. They're just not supposed to be writing them. So that 70 to 80%, I would just say kind of comes from the capacity, comes from just who our VISTA members are. And I'll chat about that in another slide here. Capacity building versus capacity adding. Just a brief thing on this one. I always run into this when I'm partnering with people is, our members should be working to add capacity in all VISTA, not just my program. Are meant to be building capacity that's going to last past their service. And so the example I always give is bailing water on a boat. If a member is in there, they can help bail water at your organization. That's capacity adding, right? As soon as they're not there, somebody else has got to bail that water. So continuing that analogy, we want to build capacity, right? We want our members to find where that leak is coming from, to build a pump, to write a grant to go buy a pump, to train people on how to bail water better, to recruit people to come bail that water. So that's something to keep in mind if you're considering a VISTA program or partnering with me or any other VISTA program, is we want to be building capacity. And this leads into our members. Like, our members want to be building capacity. If they're just doing things, they're not going to be as happy as they are when they're working on things that they know are going to add capacity to your organization long after they're gone. There is a 3-year limit to working with VISTA and working with me as a partner. This is not the case. That 3-year limit doesn't exist with AmeriCorps State and National. That's actually another reason why, if like the position that you're designing is something that you think, oh, I'm just going to keep plugging AmeriCorps members into this, it needs to be your state or national program. VISTA has a 3-year limit for a few reasons. One, our members are only paid that poverty level living wage here in Maricopa County. That's $17,000 a year that they're trying to get by on. So think about that whenever you meet an AmeriCorps VISTA member. And this is also why it's considered national service, right? Like, they are sacrificing to be there and to give to their mission. And so we have that 3-year limit because they should be building capacity, and we want to take that resource out of the organization, and we want to make sure that that capacity that was built is actually sustained, and that VISTA members don't become a source of cheap labor, because that's not what we want. With my program, we do allow people to come back and apply to us again after a break. Or if like we have a really good partnership, I really trust you, and I feel that like the role that you want to come to me for at year 4 is completely separate. And what we've built in the last 3 years is standing on its own. We might just go ahead and do year 4. Or if I'm working with a large organization like the City of Phoenix, and with the City of Phoenix, I kind of treat departments as organizations, and so I'll work with a department for 3 years, and then maybe I'll make them take a break, and I'll continue working with a different department. Member benefits, just so you know, with this is true for all VISTA members, whether they're my project or a different project. Real life experience and professional development, that is actually a part of AmeriCorps' focus, is the professional development of the member themselves. It's something where we report on for our grants. It's something we think about when we design positions. Where are they going to grow? What experiences are they getting? Living allowance here in Maricopa County, that's $675 per biweekly pay period. That's set by the federal government on a county by county basis. So obviously it's more in somewhere like New York, but it's set at the poverty level of each county. There's a healthcare allowance and or health insurance, depending on the selection of the member, what their choices are there. There is loan forbearance for federal student loans. So important to know that it's federal loans. It's not private loans, but their loans can go into forbearance while they're serving in AmeriCorps. There is an education award. This was standard across the country. It's currently $6,895. It's set at the level of the Pell Grant. And that's for each full year of service. So state and national members also usually have an opportunity to earn an education award, but it's based on the number of hours. So if you run a project that's a 500-hour in a year project, that's going to be lower. The education award amount there in front of you is for a full-time full year. And any individual can earn up to 2 full education awards in their lifetime. So Teach for America, again, being a 2-year program, what they do, their members earn that education award. TFA partners here in Arizona with ASU And so their teachers basically sign their award over to ASU. They work on their Masters of Education program while they're going through the TFA program, and they come out of TFA having their master's and having it already paid for. So that's another example of how you can make use of the AmeriCorps program. For VISTA members, they also get non-competitive eligibility, NCE, which means that they can apply to a federal job as if they're already a federal employee. That only lasts for a year. There are some ways to extend it or put it on pause. So if a member comes out of our program and they go into grad school, they can request to have it put on pause. But once they activate it, it's only good for a year. So if you are a federal program, this is a really good benefit that could be used if you're running a VISTA program. And then there are some reimbursement and childcare options there for our members as well. So AmeriCorps members, I'll say this is true for my program because it's kind of who I'm looking for, but I think that it's generally true for most of AmeriCorps. I always say that AmeriCorps members are kind of on either side of the professional spectrum. Usually they're either straight out of high school or college, depending on the program's kind of design and focus, or they're maybe retiring. And then I would say like half the people are straight out of college or high school, and then like 25% are maybe close to retirement or retired. And then there's like this other 25% that use AmeriCorps to transition into something new. And that's actually what I did in Peace Corps. I came out in a completely different degree, and then I went into Peace Corps, used Peace Corps to transition into working in nonprofits when I came out of Peace Corps. I would say that most members, or at least members in my opinion, the ideal AmeriCorps program, are looking to serve their country. They're looking to have an impact on issues that they care about, and they are connected to something larger. Whether that's true or not, none of the members are motivated by money. You wouldn't be coming into AmeriCorps if you were motivated by money. So if you're considering AmeriCorps program, you need to know, what are they motivated by? And is your program actually going to deliver on that motivation? You don't want to mislead them thinking, oh, I'm going to, go out and join NCCC, and I'm going to, do all this, they're thinking about, they're going to do all this education, and they're going to teach all these people all this stuff. Well, NCCC is actually a lot more direct service, and they, get out in the field and they do trail building and things like that. So you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what a program is and what it's going to be delivering on. So now, here in the middle of my presentation, some examples of climate roles that we have in my project. So these are VISTA. There are other types of climate work that you might be able to get into with state or national, or NCCC. So I have currently 3 roles in the city of Phoenix that I would say are climate focused. One's in the Office of actually I have 2 in the Office of Sustainability, 1 in the Office of Environmental Programs, and 1 in the Office of Innovation. What those are currently working on is sustainability is working on some transportation issues, some green transportation. That member, what does that have to do with poverty alleviation, right? Well, that member is specifically engaging underserved communities to get them engaged in the conversation, get their feedback about what they want, making sure that they're a part of that, and they're represented at the table. Another one of our sustainability Office of Sustainability programs is working in Title I schools with some green initiatives, where they have students who are engaging in conversations and designing programming at their school and implementing projects at their school. And the poverty focus there for us is building a pathway to employment in sustainability areas that we know are going to grow in the future. Our Office of Environmental Programs is working in food deserts, which seems to be a clear connection to poverty there. Previously, we worked with the city of Phoenix and Tree Shade. You're all from, for the most part, you're all from the Arizona area. So you know that tree shade and poverty, there is a close connection, but this is also one that I always use as an example for people. That if you look at a heat map and you look at an income map, those are very closely correlated. So that's how we're able to work in that, or that's how we were able to work in that. We were also able to do that via disaster prep. So some of the measurement that they have in VISTA was around disaster preparedness. And so we were able to engage in sustainability in that way. Excuse me. Office of Innovation, that one's actually got a few things going on, but one of the things that one of the smaller parts of that project is going to be working on access to public water for people who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. City of Tempe, our Office of Sustainability role there is very similar to the Title I school project that's at the City of Phoenix. And then Trees Matter was putting trees into Title I schools. And in that one, we were able to use education measurements because we had research that we could quote that said that every kid that can see a tree in their classroom have higher retention of the things that they're learning. And they also have lower behavioral issues. And so we were actually able to use an education measurement to get that position in there. Questions on VISTA itself?
I do believe there was a comment in the chat from Michael with regards to the differentiation between writing grants versus maybe doing some of the background research for it.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, and Blaine, I'm curious about, for the VISTA members that are working in these organizations, how are, most programs have a prohibition on quote unquote advocacy, which is interpreted by different service commissions in different ways. In this case, working on community engagement and education, are they helping to do some of the research and kind of background development for new policies and programs, or are they more on the implementation side of existing policies and programs?
Yeah, they're more on the implementation side of things. Some of them might be doing some of the research for those projects of, an example might be at the Title I schools. It might be like, what are good recycling programs that exist in other schools that the schools that we're working with could implement. As far as the advocacy, that's a very good point. All of these roles, except for Trees Matter, happen to already be within governments. And so the employees already fall under those rules themselves. And so they're already kind of, outside of the advocacy. Yeah, but very good question. Moving on to NCCC. So first of all, that's how you say this. For people who have only seen it written, AmeriCorps NCCC, everybody I know, we just call it NCCC. It was, if you're familiar with the Civilian Conservation Corps of the Great Depression, NCCC was basically developed to mirror that. Except for it stands for the National Civilian Community Corps, which I always mess that one up. But that's what it stands for. This is the only program, everything that we've talked about so far has been run on a grant-based model where AmeriCorps has these opportunities to run state or national or VISTA programs, but another organization has to come in and apply to AmeriCorps and say, hey, we want to run this. And the example I give is that AmeriCorps will say, like, we're interested in, issues A, B, and C. And I might come in and say, hey, I'm really interested in A and B. And this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to run it, and I want 20 members. And then AmeriCorps says, yes, they give you your grant, and then you run, and now you're an AmeriCorps program. Well, NCCC is actually run by the federal government itself directly. It's the only program that's operated like that. So these members are usually working on direct service. They're 18 to 24 years old. It's the only program that has an upper age cap to it. I always recommend this for any young person who's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm like, go join NCCC. Because they run on a cohort model. They all come in together, they train together, they travel through a few state areas. So there's different regions. So here in our area, it's like Colorado, Nevada, I believe, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and maybe they hit parts of Texas. They travel around and do projects for 3 to 13 weeks. And then they live together. They have a living allowance like VISTA does, but they're given space to live wherever they're working, so they're not paying rent or anything like that. And like AmeriCorps, they come out with like VISTA, they come out with an education award. So I always tell people, go do this, travel, get to meet some people, come out with an ed award, and then figure out maybe where you want to go to school. Why you might be interested in this? Well, you can apply to have a VISTA NCCC project come and help you out. They do 3 to 13 weeks. There's no financial cost to working with NCCC, but you do have to figure out what their housing is going to look like. They can camp, so they get used by the Forest Service a lot. And there are requirements around what you have to provide. So they have to have separate living facilities. They have to have access to shower and laundry facilities. They have to be able to have some cooking facilities and be able to store food. But a lot of forest services can provide that around campsites and things like that. You all are also able to partner up. If you have a couple other projects, maybe you can all come together and figure out the housing, and then you can split split them up, or maybe they do 3 weeks at your site and then another 2 weeks somewhere else. So generally, this is many hands make light work. Usually in CCC, you're talking about, people who are coming out of high school, maybe they've done some college, but it's usually kind of more physical labor is what NCCC kind of gets into. And then there's actually a kind of offshoot of NCCC that's called FEMA Corps. And basically that's NCCC members who are just like permanently posted with FEMA. And so they'll go into disaster areas. They might get some very specific training around helping people through applying for assistance after a disaster and things like that. Any questions on NCCC at the moment? All right.
There's one.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
How are
It's-
NCCCs paid for? So the government itself, federal government itself pays them. And again, as a partner who's working with NCCC, the only cost to you is figuring out the housing. And so and again, their housing, if you have, let's say you're able to partner with like a local church or community center, you could give them the gymnasium if there's showers in that spot, access to the showers, and maybe a hot plate and a fridge if that's in that area, and they're good to go because they can bring cots, they can bring tents, so that housing necessarily doesn't have to even come out of a financial pot, but you could also find something to pay for as well. Yeah, they're always looking for projects too, so they're a good one. And then Michael, I might bring you in here on this one. So then Climate Corps, there is a national conversation around Climate Corps. There has been some conversation around creating a national Climate Corps, and maybe it's something under NCCC, maybe it's kind of like FEMA Corps, or maybe it's its own thing. If you look around, you will see that there are some states that have what they call Climate Corps. For your own knowledge, those are like state programs. That's what they are. They're an AmeriCorps state program or they're an AmeriCorps national program. It's just that they've named themselves Climate Corps. So that's just like the name that they're using. But it's not like its own standalone Climate Corps that's coming out of AmeriCorps itself yet. So, as I've talked about with VISTA, every AmeriCorps falls under the executive branch. And so with each administration, sometimes new performance measurements are opened up or they allow a broader definition of something. But as I already was kind of telling you, like we're able to work in climate spaces by focusing on other impacts within those performance measurements. And you're still able to access some of these resources. Michael, I'd love to hear anything you have to say on kind of the Climate Corps conversation nationally.
Yeah, thanks, Blaine. It's an exciting conversation. The America Service Commissions, who largely represent the state programs within each of the states around AmeriCorps, they've convened a working group through America Service Commissions, which is the organization that represents the 50 states and the territories. And 17 states are now working together to think through what Climate Corps looks like within their own states. This working group was originally established because of, I don't know if you remember, all of the big conversations about a year and a half, 2 years ago around the civilian Climate Corps, where there was huge ambitions, 1 million plus service members going through the process every year. That has not materialized. The recent Inflation Reduction Act actually stripped out part of that proposal, which was a tightened up proposal for a civilian Climate Corps. And so what we have now is there's a lot of people that got really interested in figuring out how do we actually do this without these additional resources, leveraging our existing resources. A lot of folks don't call it Climate Corps, per Blain's point, right? Like you can get a lot of work done on climate and community resilience, community capacity building that benefits the climate discussion without actually calling it climate. And that's really meaningful for some more conservative areas of the country. But one of the things that's really interesting is that there is a fair amount of funding available right now that can be leveraged to do climate and resilience AmeriCorps programs, whether it be through VISTA, whether it be through state programs. There's planning grants available to actually develop that work. And it's an exciting time because deploying this next generation of climate policy and program leaders, this is a wonderful way to get them into the space. Just as so many of us, as Blain talked about, as mid-career transition or transition over to the service space, leveraging volunteerism. This is an exciting time because we do have a huge need in the community of practice around climate and resilience, and really not enough people in the space to really serve the communities that are trying to grapple with climate impacts and emissions reductions. So I'll just leave it there, but happy to talk in more detail if needed.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'm glad that you're on this call to be able to share that. I want to kind of get through these next couple ones real fast so we can get to some questions. But if there wasn't enough AmeriCorps for you already, there is also AmeriCorps Senior. So it could be called Senior Corps, or it might be called AmeriCorps Seniors. If you remember back to that earlier slide, actually didn't fall under AmeriCorps originally, but now that CNCS calls themselves AmeriCorps, that's where some of this name changes come from with AmeriCorps Seniors. So this is all three of these types of AmeriCorps Seniors. You have to be 55 plus to be a part of these programs. So probably not going to be applicable to most of you, but there's the foster grandparent program, which is mostly around mentoring youth in various settings, and it also helps care for premature disabled children. There's RSVP, which is basically like an AmeriCorps national program, but geared towards seniors. So that might be one that you could tap into if for some reason you wanted to specifically focus on seniors. But note that NCCC is the only program that has an upper age limit. So I've had retirees as a part of my program. There's no reason that retirees can't serve in state or national or VISTA. It's just that AmeriCorps Seniors may be a little bit more geared towards them. And then there's Senior Companions, which is serving as a friend or companion to older neighbors and making sure that they have someone that they can rely on and who kind of checks in on them. One difference, one area, one reason you might want to go this route with a RSVP is if you've decided you kind of want to aim at recruiting seniors, you want to tap into that knowledge that already exists and bring them into your project. AmeriCorps Seniors does have some benefits with them being able to give their education award to their children or their grandchildren, rather than them using it themselves. They've started to make some rule changes that allow AmeriCorps VISTA and state and national older members to be able to do that, but in the past it has been challenging for that. So that is one reason you might want to tap into that. You might not know this, there are 2 national days of service, Martin Luther King Jr. and 9/11, and all AmeriCorps programs are supposed to be doing projects on those days. It's a really good day to potentially grab some AmeriCorps help on just that one day if you have like a really big project, or it's also a good day to put on a big public volunteer opportunity because these 2 days are not just for AmeriCorps. They are federally designated days of volunteering and giving back to the community, but they kind of come out of AmeriCorps there. I kind of already talked about who AmeriCorps members are, so I'm just going to skip that since we already talked about making sure that you're delivering on what it is that they're looking to have and that they're not motivated by money. So what questions could I answer? I see a couple here. One, I will say, I saw the note on NCCC that 18 to 26, that upper age limit, part of it changed during the pandemic, but also the 25 and 26-year-olds, they serve as leaders to the NCCC members themselves. And usually leaders are people who already served one term in NCCC, but not necessarily always. So there's that. And do seniors receive financial stipends as well? Oh, very good question. They do, but unfortunately, since that's their own program, I don't actually, this is the area I know the least. And I forgot to say, here in Maricopa County, the Area Agency on Aging is the local intermediary program that runs some of these. I do believe foster grandparents and senior companions, they have like a really, really low stipend that hasn't changed in like 15 years. And the current administration's fighting to get that changed. So I mean, like their stipend's like a couple bucks a day. And then RSVP, I think, has a higher one. And I don't know what those programs requirements are or restrictions are around being able to give more benefits. So like in VISTA, there's very specific I can't just pay a VISTA more money. I can give them a grocery gift card. I can give them a gas gift card. I can do other things. I could cover their housing if I had a way to do that, but I can't. It's a part of AmeriCorps that I am not allowed to just give them cash. Yeah.
I think we'd like to open it up at this point for individual questions or maybe general questions on clarification for the information you've provided. That's a lot.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, I know I'm going to have to go back to my notes because it is a lot to keep track of. No wonder, organizations have some difficulty maybe navigating how to use the VISTAs and affiliate programs. So
absolutely happy to answer any questions here too, but also like I love national service. I will talk to you about programs that you might be able to tap into, whether it's my program or not. So any one of you, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to talk to you about what might be the best fit for you.
Great. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question or maybe get a clarification on how you could use someone within your organization. Go ahead, Evelyn.
I just had a real logistical question for you, Blain. What do you know the if the Office of Sustainability here in Tempe still has an AmeriCorps member?
No.
Okay.
They do not have a member. We have a position that's been on hold. You may know that Braden's been out on paternity leave for a while. Yeah. So I've been waiting for him to kind of come back and be able to kick that one back into gear. So yeah, technically it's on the books, but it's been on hold for a little bit.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and I was wondering, are educational institutions like ASU able to use these type of programs? And what are some examples?
Yeah, well, I mean, ASU has the Public Allies program that's run through, ASU. Evelyn, if you want to maybe give a brief overview of what Public Allies is.
Yeah, so I was just thinking when the question about the like federal agencies and stuff. Yeah, so ASU runs Public Allies through the Lodestar Center. So it's through nonprofit management leadership. So again, kind of as I alluded to earlier, it's more of a leadership training program, and the logistics for that, the dollar amount I think might be a little bit higher than a VISTA, but also that was a long time ago for me, so I don't know what's changed. And the way it works is, you do have basically a full-time staff. The Public Ally works 9 out of every 10 days in a nonprofit office. That 10th day or every other Friday is usually a full day of training with the Lodestar Center, with other partners, usually visiting partner sites. And the cohort, it's 10 months, they're in lockstep. So all the cohort gets all the same training. They do all the same sort of workshops and leadership things. And I want to say it's anywhere from 12 to 18 Public Allies per 10-month term of service. So it's fairly small, but very mighty.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful.
I see another question in here about historically Black colleges and universities. And I'll also give another example of a ASU program that might help with that. As far as I know, anybody can correct me on this, colleges and universities, as long as they're public institutions and they fall under nonprofits, like they all apply. I'm sure there's some for-profit colleges out there that fall outside, but I don't know the technicalities of how they fall outside. But ASU has a program at the Mary Lou Fulton School. Going back to Teach for America, it's hard to recruit teachers. It's hard to retain teachers. We know that we're going to have a teacher shortage. This disproportionately impacts lower income communities. And so the Mary Lou Fulton School has a program where they use their seniors in college, their college seniors, as mentors for the people who are just now entering the teaching program, and give them some coaching and some mentoring, and just help them stay within the program. Those seniors are AmeriCorps members. They're running an AmeriCorps program, and they're giving them some AmeriCorps benefits. And what they're doing is supporting those other students. So absolutely, I could see a university making use like that to increase retention, or to target underserved communities or impoverished communities, and or any of the other types of AmeriCorps projects that you could get into, and you can run them and get them out there.
That's a great example. Thank you. That's helpful to know how to possibly use that internally.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I think the foundational thing when you're considering whether AmeriCorps fits or not is thinking about the experience of the members, and if you're going to be able to design something that those people want to be a part of, because the fitting it into AmeriCorps bit is actually the easier bit. Right now, hiring is challenging, as you may all know, but I will tell you also right now, climate's my number one. Education, I can hardly recruit anybody in education. Like the current generation of people who are looking at AmeriCorps who want to get involved in something, like education's not top of mind for them. So I have roles that are in that area that have set open for a while. Anything that has to do with green, climate, anything like that is still a hot area, and I get a number of applicants in that.
Blain, I can speak to that briefly, and I want, if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand, but while we have a bit of time, we have a number of climate vistas, right, and it has been really successful for us, and I think I just appreciated you kind of talking about, we've seen a lot of folks that say either starting out right after school or want that career change, and this is a really good way to get into climate work, right? I know I had that as an earlier career professional, right, of like, how do you even start? So yeah, we've just seen that experience and have hosted a number of climate vistas. I have two questions. One is maybe logistical. So our vistas, we work through the NAU program, right? Mm-hmm. And so I want to just make sure that I'm clear that sort of the NAU Center for Service and Volunteerism is a host, like, nope, they're not a host site. They're a program like you, right?
Yeah. So that would be an intermediary model. They're holding the AmeriCorps grant. Yep.
Right. So they have the grant just like you do, and then they distribute, because I think they work with something like 20 sites as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have a cost share with them?
We do.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's common, just so you all know, it's common for a lot of intermediaries to have a cost share, because, it costs to have me here and take on all that AmeriCorps paperwork. So you don't have to. But there are some programs like Public Allies where ASU is behind them and they've got the funding. And so they're just passing their AmeriCorps members out. And so they might have their qualifications might be, well, you have to work in these specific sectors, but maybe they don't have a financial cost. Another thing to note with intermediaries is, as I was saying before, there could be a lot of, like, some intermediaries might be a 50-50 split. It might be the members with us half time doing this and you're only getting them half the time. Or as Evelyn was saying, it was every, second Friday where she was back at training. I only pull my members once a month. They have one time a month training, and they also do 4 service days for us and calendar projects throughout the month. But
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, ours, it's been really nice because it does mean that our vistas have a community, right? Like, so they're in local government, they have the community of our sustainability office, which is, we think is really fun, but they also have that community of folks within Flag staff, at least, right, that are doing other vistas that they can kind of work with and get to know. I think has been really, we've heard has been really valuable for them.
And another great consideration, whether you're looking at working with an intermediary model or whether you're thinking about running your own project, is the experience of connecting with other members. Is your project big enough for them to connect with other members within your program, or are you going to have to very intentionally get them connected with other projects?
Right.
Yeah. Another thing I was just thinking of, we were chatting, Jenny, how many of you hired after their service?
A lot. We have had a lot of our positions, even moving into like more senior positions within our sustainability team, that we've been able to, we've used it as a way to say, like, we need a position here, right? We've only, you know, been able to do this and we've built this capacity. But wouldn't it be great if we did that? And so, yeah, pre-screening and, you know, just, it has been truly incredible. I think maybe 5 folks in the like 6 years that I've been here, we've brought from AmeriCorps, from Vistas into either part-time, but usually full-time positions.
Yeah. Yeah. So our largest partner right now is City of Phoenix. They're usually about at least half of my projects. And like 7 of the last 9 have been hired. And the 2 that weren't hired was because they decided they wanted to do something else. So good way to bring people in and see if you want to keep them on. But also, as you were saying, in the building capacity, sometimes our roles are showing the rest of the funders like, hey, this position does work. And so now that we've proven that, like, can we make it a full-time role?
Absolutely.
Blain, you mentioned the city of Phoenix. I know for like Doritza, who's in Douglas, that's a smaller community. Do you have examples of maybe how a small community has utilized you know, a VISTA, you know, in various capacities?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, well, so first of all, I'm an intermediary that runs here in Maricopa County. And again, I'm always happy to talk to everybody about anything I know. There is a program that's basically me with the Arizona Alliance of Nonprofits. We basically run the exact same thing, except for they focus in rural Arizona. So one, you know, I think with a smaller city, you're probably definitely looking at an intermediary model, just so you're not taking on all that capacity, you're not taking on all that knowledge yourself. But yeah, so I know that and within the green space, I don't have specific examples, but I do know some projects that have been around, like improving local businesses, which are like, well, how does that apply? That's, you know, you're not supposed to be giving direct benefits to for-profit organizations. But that work was all around building the economic community, about building more jobs. And so that's what that member was kind of working alongside the local Chamber of Commerce to help improve the local economic opportunities that were there. But I can easily see, I mean, you could have a member that could be designing a volunteer program for your city. You know, the city of Phoenix has that. Yeah, I mean, basically anything that's happening on the large city model, I think could happen at a smaller scale on a smaller city. Sorry, I don't know if that quite answers your question, but.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of, I know you service the Phoenix metro region, but we also work with so many communities outside of the region. And so it's always nice to be able to put that in context for the smaller communities. They often feel like they get left out. And so there are ways to actually, integrate something like this to provide support.
You absolutely can. And there are benefits and challenges, right? I grew up in rural Ohio. And I mean, right now I have a really hard time bringing my members in on a VISTA stipend because they're living here in the city of Phoenix. The Arizona Alliance of Nonprofits, what they do with their partner sites is part of what their partner sites are on the hook for is housing. But it's so much cheaper for them to have housing or find housing. You know, a lot of times in the rural communities, they might have somebody who has a house that they'll just let the member live in, or, you know, a guest house in the back. You do have to think about that connection, though, again, to other AmeriCorps members and how that's going to happen. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for service. And you'll find more Peace Corps type people who are drawn to the rural communities, who are like, yeah, I want to be out there on my own doing the work.
That's great. All right. Oh, Jenny.
One last question. Blain, when we've, you know, this has come up and we've discussed this as a group before, and, you know, a handful of folks brought up kind of the equity concerns. And I really would love to hear your perspective, or other folks who have served on that perspective, right? Of, you know, the very, very low wage of VISTA, right? And sort of, you know, we have equity goals, and so how do we kind of move forward with this? And I'm sure you're really familiar with that, as well as, you know, are we only allowing a certain type of person to do this and have the service due to privileges that we have? Can you maybe just give your, I'm not expecting a clean answer, but maybe like your perspective and how you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly things that are baked in, and I do talk about this sometimes, not just AmeriCorps, but like actually VISTA specifically, because the bake in with VISTA and having this poverty level living stipend is the ideal is that you're living in that condition to better understand that condition. Well, the assumption is that you didn't already do that. That you didn't grow up in poverty, that you haven't experienced this before. So that's the bake in from the very beginning. And then, yeah, the fact that it's still there. I go back and forth. There are some things that nationally they're trying to improve on with the living allowance. And this is a conversation that the current administration is having nationally of how do we improve this. I do think at the end of the day, there's only so far you can go for my money because I want it to still be national service. And I believe that service has to require some sort of sacrifice. That doesn't mean that you can't design a program. I think it's easier to answer the question within a specific project. If you have the funding to say, hey, we're going to be able to give housing to these people, or if we were able to, an idea I have, but I've got lots of ideas that I don't have time to launch, is, if you have outside funding with the NAACP or a state program to say, hey, if you come from these communities or you come from this background, we have this outside funding that we're going to be able to inject in to take care of your housing or build that equity without changing the program itself. So it's a very good question. It's a question that you should ask when you're thinking about your project and who you're bringing in, who you're trying to serve, and what barriers there are to service. Very specifically, my project already has some baked in that, like, we're looking for college grads for our positions because of the level of position that we are designing. We just need somebody that has that kind of background, whether it's in the degree of the area that we're looking at or not. But I'll tell you, I'm first generation college, and coming through Teach for America, I learned so much about why that was important. And it's when I'm going through it's also how you design your application process. So when I'm going through my application process, if I see somebody who mentions it or seems like they're first generation, or it looks like they were working while they were going through college, I'm like, yes, because I've also had kids who've like, this is their first real job and they come into VISTA, and there's so much where I'm just like, dude, you got to be on time, and people expect you to be here because they haven't had that experience. And people who are first gen, like they figured out college on their own and they worked, and they're great. And I have to tell them that they're great. I'm like, no, all this counts. You have such great experience. Come in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to lift one point that Blaine made, which is the commitment to service is such an important part of the screening of candidates for national service programs, because I think what we found from doing kind of retrospective looks at programs is that if you're bringing in people based on technical expertise, many of them are going to leave halfway through the service year to take jobs that are higher paying. And if you're bringing people in that are committed to service, you have very few people that leave because they're committed to that full year. And they may not be the technical experts that you may want to be sitting in those chairs, but by the end of the year, you're going to have someone that's totally devoted to the work, that's committed to the organization that they're supporting, the community they're supporting, and as Jenny mentioned, wonderful candidates to be able to transition into a full-time career with the organization. So just wanted to lift that comment up from Blaine, to think about these as truly service positions and not necessarily technical positions that require a specific technical background.
Yeah, the 2 points that was just like, we look for a connection to something larger than yourself that's going to drive you through the challenges of the year. And then also we very specifically look about next steps. Where are you? Where do you want to go? And does this make sense in helping get you there? Yeah. I see something raised by Jennifer and also a comment from Joan.
Jenny, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks for this, Blaine. I'm just on the AmeriCorps website, and wondering about, thinking about what this would look like. I'm a faculty member at ASU, but I work with a Title I charter school in South Phoenix who's focused on urban greening and reduction of air pollution, reduction of heat, and then embedding all of that into their curriculum. So I think we've got a really great idea. It seems like and I know the school has looked into this before and maybe it was just too overwhelming at the time, or, but how would you say, like, for ASU to help them out? Like, this should come from the school, I think, because the person, the VISTA would actually work at the school, but like, or maybe give some examples of how larger entities like the city of Phoenix, like the city of Tempe, have worked with schools specifically to help them get a VISTA at a like smaller nonprofit or school.
Yeah. So first of all, you and I could chat offline. I know we're kind of close here on time, but just quickly, are you guys are thinking about like a single AmeriCorps member, just one member?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you should go an intermediary model. Whether that's ASU's running it or you're running through me. There's so much knowledge and so much it takes to write an AmeriCorps program. Either partner with me or somebody else, and pay the fee, and they take all the AmeriCorps stuff, and we'll help you design the position, and you get the position, and you don't have to dive into all that challenge.
Oh, so we don't have to do any of this concept paper project application.
I mean, you do some of it with me, but I know it.
Yeah.
and
okay, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got your in with
All right, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll follow up with you then.
Yeah. Great.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and then Joan,
Thank you.
there are other, for VISTA, there you can qualify for SNAP benefits, and there, find other support that's out there. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's great.
Thanks.
Well, Blain, thank you so much. I purposely was consulting with Jenny, and we thought the conversation was going so well with the Q&A, so we let it go. So I'm glad we did. But thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on your program and all the complexities and that. So definitely, would you put your contact information in the chat?
Yep.
And that way, if folks want to reach out to you, certainly they can send me a note and I'll connect you all. But yeah, thank you so much for the information and also what you do out in the community. That's great. You set not only individuals, but organizations and programs and communities up for success. So that's greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And I enjoyed the conversation. Always talk to me about AmeriCorps or Peace Corps.
Wonderful. Great.